So, the procedure was parliamentary. No, I'm not even going to do that today. I'm not even going to do that. You know what? We can nitpick in terms of technicality, whether these guys are world class, world level championship caliber fighters. But man, that aside, it was absolutely epic. What a fantastic, entertaining fight for a number of reasons. Of course, the showman himself, Chris Eubank Sr., turned up, and as soon as I saw that, it was like, man, listen, the emotions were running. Like, honestly, it was a good sight to see, and to see them united. And I guess it gave Chris Eubank Jr. a boost, whether he knew that Senior was coming all along or not. Who knows? But it was it added to the occasion, and it would have been a sore miss if he wasn't there in attendance. And listen, man, all I can say is these guys, absolutely hats off, and and just much respect. Sometimes, right, there are things that are bigger than belts. There's some people out there, like for instance Simon Jordan, who talks about this fight in particular being a farce, etc., and everything else. But listen, these guys fought for the legacy of their fathers, and for the difference in weight, the difference in weight classes, the difference in age. These guys did both of their fathers proud, respectively. Honestly, the amount of heart. Do you know the pressure? Not only just being in a huge stadium capacity fight that these guys were in, that they've never been anything in that magnitude before, but to be in that and to have and to hold their father's legacy on their backs. Honestly, man, I was feeling, my heart was racing for them. The pressure was immense. You can only imagine. And there are not many human beings that can do what they did this Saturday night. And I can only give both men a huge amount of respect. And, rightly so. I think Chris Eubank Jr. was the winner. It was close up until the first 4 to 5 rounds. And then I thought that Chris Eubank separated himself with just some crafty veteranship. He was leaning into him at times, and these were tactics to tire the younger fighter in Conor Benn out and weigh down his legs. And then ultimately, that energy and that gusto that you had from Conor Benn in the first few rounds was no longer really there, and he started finding himself backed up onto the ropes because the fatigue was setting in, and Eubank Jr. was leaning in with his punches, which sometimes there wasn't really much pop on all of them. There was like maybe 1, 2, 3, and then he'd pop on the last or the first and last shot, and he would catch Benn, and it was a very grueling, tiring war of attrition. And you were wondering, who was going to fold, because Eubank was he emptied the gas tank, and so did Conor Benn. But I think Eubank just reached a bit deeper into his soul, to pull out that extra bit more because of where he's at and the stage he's at in his career, and that, a loss would have been absolutely devastating. But listen, like Conor said, potentially the rematch, which would be fantastic. And if there is a rematch, it should be in either Tottenham Hotspur Stadium again or in Wembley Stadium. I definitely think that it would pack out. For the casuals, this was extremely entertaining. For the purists, we can nitpick all day in terms of different technicalities, that Conor Benn, in terms of, limiting himself in what he was doing and not really having any options and not being able to fight off the back foot efficiently. There was only once or twice where he was able to spin out off the ropes and find himself into, near enough to the center of the ring and controlling the space. But but listen, that's a story for another day. This was absolutely entertaining. This is gonna go down in my collection of potential fight of the years, just for the magnitude, what it meant for British boxing, the names that these men carried, and just everything that they put on the line. They put everything. They took shots left, right, and center. And Eubank's chin, he got rocked a few times. Benn got rocked a few times, but both men, showed granite chins and granite toughness and an unwavering will to see it through and get to the end no matter what. And that's exactly what they did. I thought someone was going to go. I thought at the last round, in the 12th round, that potentially Benn might, but he stood tall. And you know what? he might if he works on some few things, you know, they definitely need to work on the defense element, because you know he was taking a lot of clean shots, and you know, while Eubank Jr. wasn't putting power into everything, just, you know, he needs to add a few elements to his game just to, you know, ensure some kind of longevity to his career. Because, you know, if he's going to be chasing world titles and whatnot, and he's going to be going on for the next, you know, 5, 6, 7 years in the boxing space, you know, he can't be having too many more of those. But listen, it was extremely entertaining. The rest of the card was also interesting as well, but like, I can't even remember anything else right now. So I'll probably have to go back and watch the highlights and pick up the few bits and pieces over there. But all in all, for my predictions, you know, 3 out of 5 is not bad. So we'll call that a good day. And listen, guys, I will see you guys soon. Peace.